As always, I want to continue this conversation with Techonomy founder David Kirkpatrick and Chamber of Progress founder and CEO Adam Kovakovich. David, I want to start with you since we've been talking about this now. It feels like almost every day since April 14th. Now it's official. What about Twitter is going to change under Elon Musk?
Well, you know, actually, I thought what Brad just said was very interesting. And if you really ask yourself, is this a financial takeover or a political takeover or both? If it's both, I am not as worried about the free speech issues because obviously the business will require significant moderation. It's not just a matter of obeying the law. Users expect a more or less safe environment in which to function. But, you know, in my macro response to the whole deal is that it's probably a good thing, cautious optimism, because interestingly, regarding Facebook, which, as you know, I think about a lot, I've said for a long time that the best thing for Facebook would be if Zuckerberg found a way to take it private so he could make the difficult changes, which he doesn't even seem to want to make, sadly. But taking Twitter private, taking any company private, as Michael Dell proved, is a way to really do difficult things that the market might not let you do. And I think some of the suggestions he has, and most notably authenticating all humans, which we could talk about in a minute in more detail if you want, could be very positive changes.
We'll get to that in a second. Adam, I want to know how you would answer that question. Do you believe Elon Musk has the public's best interests at heart, Twitter users' interests at heart, or Elon Musk's interests at heart?
Well, I think we'll see. It's an open question. I think every platform, Twitter included, starts off with a bent towards free expression. That's what he's stated pretty clearly. The problem is that 1% of users who make a mess of the place, right, with spam, harassment, hate speech, what some people call lawful but awful speech. And the problem is that if you don't do anything about that kind of speech, you drive away your happy, productive 99% responsible users, and you turn off your advertisers who really don't want their ads appearing next to hateful or harassing content. Look, every community wants both a generally free environment, but also a police force to enforce the rules. And that's what most people want on social media. That comes through in polling. People want more transparency for expression, but they also want clear content moderation, and they don't want to see junk. And I think he'll see that.
Well, Renee DiResta put this, I believe, very eloquently, where she said Elon Musk is equal parts innovator, equal parts potentially troll. Even though I think we can all agree Elon Musk is incredibly innovative, is he innovative enough to figure out free speech in a way that works for everyone when so many people, so many massive companies that have come before have not been able to? Adam.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, frankly, one of the challenges about this is that Twitter is such an important service for policymakers, for newsmakers, that whoever runs the company, whether it's Musk or whether it's Jack Dorsey or DeCoslo before them, have found that sort of politicians working the refs over content policies to be a huge headache. And I suspect once that initial enthusiasm passes, he may find that too. It may be relatively easy to reinstate Trump, as Brad said. But what happens the next time there's a January 6th type event? What happens when Nancy Pelosi calls because she doesn't like a call they've made? So these are calls that no social media CEO relishes making, but unfortunately, it's part of the job.
Now, Elon Musk loves polls. If only he could do a poll saying, do you want me to own Twitter, yes or no? We would know how many Twitter users are actually in favor of this. Certainly, there's a huge contingent of people that thinks, and including the Twitter board, this is the right thing to do. David, you mentioned the idea of authenticating users. What exactly would that accomplish?
Well, let's remember, Twitter has never required users to really be anything. You could call yourself anything, you could be anyone, and there was really a lot of opacity in terms of who was actually speaking. Of course, some people identified themselves clearly on their Twitter profile, et cetera, but that was not a requirement of the service. Facebook, on the other hand, has always had that. And even though it's been diverged from to some degree, it really did, to some extent, maintain civility in the service relatively. And I think this could be a more civil conversation just by making that change on Twitter in itself, where you always knew who was speaking, because anonymity is one of the real scourges of disinformation and causes a way of successful disinformation. If you don't know who's speaking, people can mask themselves, etc. So I think that's a very positive thing. But I want to just keep going back to this question: Does Musk really want to make money from this deal, or is he considering this a plaything? You'd think with this kind of expenditure, he's got to make a good business. If he really has to make a good business, I think these agonizing questions everybody's asking about moderation will be settled by the marketplace, and they will be settled in the way that we were just hearing. He will have to moderate just like every other social media does, because that is what users and the community wants.
And maybe SpaceX is an interesting comparison there, because he has kept that as a private company, but we don't know what the financials look like. Adam, I'm curious to hear from you, given you running in these Washington policy circles. Is this going to raise the eyebrows of policymakers? Do you foresee any potential regulatory issues down the line?
I don't foresee any issues, particularly with the sale in terms of a review or anything like that. I think we've already seen that Republicans and Democrats are viewing this a little bit differently. I think in the last couple of weeks, you've seen congressional Republicans cheering for Musk's takeover of the company, perhaps because they think he's going to allow Trump back on. I think if you gave most Republicans in Congress truth serum, they'd probably say that Trump being on Twitter was better for Democrats and a headache for Republicans. So I do think you'll see the continued working of the refs. That's always been true of social media. But I don't foresee significant regulatory issues. I do foresee that Musk will continue to poke at regulators like the SEC. That's been part of his history.
And Parag Agrawal, the CEO of Twitter, is actually in the middle of an all-hands meeting with employees right now. He's just said that the company will continue to operate as usual until the deal closes. We're getting headlines from the meeting now that no layoffs are currently planned, that stock grants will continue to vest, but there's going to be a hiring freeze for now. David, really curious how employees are taking this. As I understand it, there's been a huge contingent of people not happy about this, and another contingent of people strongly in favor of Elon Musk. Also curious about Jack Dorsey and the role that he's played in this equation. We saw some, tension going back and forth between Jack and Elon Musk. Jack changing his official title to blockhead. Elon Musk complimenting that and saying that title is on fire. Jack responding that Elon Musk is the techno king. What has been the influence, do you think, of Jack Dorsey on this deal, having left the company?
It's a good thing to speculate about. My guess is that Jack, like me, is cautiously optimistic about what this could mean, but nobody can look at Elon Musk and not worry that something could spin out of control in an unpredictable direction. And I'm sure Jack, who feels very deeply attached to and proprietary about Twitter, wants to see his baby kept healthy. But I also think he knows that there have been important changes that they have been prevented from making, because it would potentially cause short-term profit implications or revenue implications, and that is all going to go away once the company's private. But can I just ask Adam a question, though, because I wonder about the SEC. They still have to approve this transaction. Here's a guy who was accused and settled with them for securities fraud regarding Tesla, and didn't necessarily abide by the terms of the settlement. And what is the possibility, as a Washington guru, Adam, that maybe the SEC might think of him as potentially unsuitable unless certain conditions are put on this transaction? It's not an antitrust issue, but they have the right to do whatever they want.
Sure. It's not out of the question. And certainly SEC Chair Gary Gensler has not been shy about using his authority when it comes to, for example, the whole crypto industry. They haven't yet done this kind of thing, but I think it's very possible. And certainly to the extent that he could say, look, this is kind of my moment to extract some kind of conditions or concessions, I think that's very possible. And of course, that's not the end of it, right? Because even in Musk's role as head of Tesla, he's constantly tangling with regulators around safety and all these other questions, and there's some important questions. So I don't think even the acquisition is even probably the end of Musk's interaction with regulators around Twitter.
All right, well, this is certainly not the end of anything. We're going to have to leave it there, David.